So you've been making this one model for 25 years?
Yeah, yep. This is the amp that started Decware and set the benchmark.
Wow.
Everything that we've done since this amp has been an attempt to capture the same sound, but just have more of it. In other words, the same sound, but more power.
Right.
And that's very hard to do because the sound is largely keyed to the fact that there's only maybe 3 parts in the signal path. And you know, when you make more power, you got to have more parts. And when there's only 3, it doesn't take long to double the parts. And you can hear that, you know. So it's been a long journey. Our Zen Mystery Amp, which is 40 watts, is where it tops out.
Yeah.
I can't take it any further than that, nor do I see a real need to. But that's the window that we work within. And, you know, we don't, or I don't anyways, automatically upsell people to bigger amps. I generally, if I can, steer them towards something a little smaller.
So, yeah, I hadn't noticed that El34 amp before, the integrated.
Right.
That's been there all along?
It's been there for 17 years, I think, now.
Pretty long time.
It's the same thing as the amp that you have, but it's using the bigger tubes.
Mm-hmm.
We call it an integrated because it has the real estate for up to 4 pair of inputs.
Okay.
So it's a play on words because really none of our amps are integrated in the sense that there's a preamp inside them. None of them.
Oh.
They all have a passive gain control on the input, and most of them have maybe 2 pair of inputs so that a guy can run them without a preamp if he chooses to.
Right. Do most people use them that way? In other words, without a preamp?
Well, I think a lot of people will start out that way. We look at preamps as tools to make your source sound better. I don't think it makes the amp sound better, nor does the amp have any idea that you've got a preamp. It's just a tool to make your source sound better. You know, add some bloom, some body, some density, the kinds of things that are typically lacking when you streamline, you know, right from a DAC chip to an amp.
Right.
So the other thing is that if the preamp is less transparent than the amplifier, then you get into a lot of trade-offs, you know. So we want people to hear the amp with and without a preamp so that they can find out if their preamp is actually as good as they think it is, or bad as they think it is, or, you know, just where it rates against a Zen amp. So it's a game of hearing only the weakest link, and we sell everything on a 30-day trial. So early on, I got a little bit paranoid about how bad people would handicap the product with, you know, their own preamp.
I see.
And I just wanted to make damn sure they could hear it with and without so that they can know for a fact whether it's the right thing to pair it with or not.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, because they're all integrated in that you could use them without a preamp.
Correct. Yeah, they all have accommodations for at least 2 sources and a volume control.
Mm-hmm. So, how do you feel about? I think the answer is yes, but how do you feel about tube rolling? Do you encourage that?
Yeah. Tube rolling is one of the joys of owning a tube amp. I don't twist people's arms to do it because I ship the amps with what I feel are the best tubes in current production that they can get their hands on.
Mm.
And I expect them to use those tubes during the 30-day evaluation.
Okay.
But that said, tube rolling is a way, it's a tool for voicing your amp to your speakers in your room and your other equipment. And Most people who explore it are glad they did. Some of us that are a little neurotic about it wish we'd never opened that can of worms, but you know.
But the tube is the amplifying device itself, right? The rest of the amp essentially is power supply. Is that
That's it.
fair?
That's it. So, anything that could go wrong is on the outside of the amp, which is kind of nice.
Mm.
In the case of that integrated that you mentioned, that's an EL34 based amp, which it's also cathode biased. So it doesn't really care whether it's an EL34 or a 6L6 or a KT77 or an 807 with an adapter or a 7027 or a KT88 or a 6550. And, all of the tubes in that family are plug and play in those amps. So none of them sound the same. So that alone would be like owning 7 different amplifiers and just choosing the one that you think sounds the best. And you're going to have a preference. So it increases the odds that you're going to like it dramatically over a black box with a red light staring at you and a, outlet in the back. I mean, you get out of it what you get. So there's no changing it. You can let it warm up for 8 hours, and that's about all you can do.
So the thing about this current model is this new, how do you put it, the transformer? Oh, the UFO?
Yeah, the ultra fidelity output.
Yeah.
That was just some branding I came up with after
Yeah,
having
that.
beer. Yep, that's what differentiates the one that you have now from the last time you reviewed one, which is quite some time ago. We've always made our own output transformers, and they've always been above the norm, which has been one of the secrets. But I decided to kick it up a notch and see how far we could take it within, to that point of diminishing returns, of course. So we took something good and we made it even better, and just rolled it into the line. So all of the amps are using these new transformers that are still made here in the States. They just have really wide bandwidth. For example, I think last time I measured the amp that you have, the response was flat out to 74K and pretty slowly rolling after that. Now, we don't expect nor care that it goes up that high. But what I found is when you interleave an output transformer to the point where you can start to get that really wide bandwidth, the response gets unusually flat, with like these are plus or minus 1/4 of a dB, and our originals were plus or minus 1 dB. And so that's what I'm looking for. It's the refinement that comes in the band that you can hear, which is made possible by the shit that you can't hear on either end.
That's cool.
So that's kind of the logic behind it. But these little amps deserve it. What you hear different is it's more articulate. The leading edges are a little better defined. The dynamics are somewhat improved. The power's about the same, but the headroom is probably a little better.
So I'm as they used to say, I'm asking for a friend. I'm joking, but so you don't offer any remotes on any of your amplifiers?
No, here it's a common question.
That's why I'm asking.
Complicated answer. Once we get past the first part, no.
Okay.
I do make a preamp that's fully balanced preamp with remotes, but most of our customers are in the single-ended category, and we don't have any remote controls for that. We have an option for a remote control in one of our switch boxes, but that was never meant as a, a solution to this quote unquote problem. Here's the deal with the 2-watt amp, even with efficient speakers, you're going to turn it up about as loud as you can get it without it clipping. So a remote could only serve to turn it back down, It's just the need for it kind of goes away. That's one. Two, these amps, as you've probably figured out, don't need to be turned up to bloom. So you're not hunting for frequency balance with the volume control anymore. It's just always there. And because of that, that need to tweak the volume up and tweak the volume down from track to track dissipates to the point where a lot of guys will sit there with their remote the whole time. And after they're done, they realize that they haven't even touched it.
Uh-huh.
That's what happens. And that's part of the other part is that I can't find a remote that will fit in the 2-inch space that we have to work with in these chassis.
Mm-hmm. Hey, you've gotten this far without it, you're good. I have to say that the 25th anniversary amp is basically like an Uber version of the amp that you sent, right?
Right.
And it's great that they're both rated at the same output, so the triple the price doesn't buy me more power or anything. It's the same power.
Yeah.
But it looks fantastic. But does it actually sound? The dumb question is, does it actually sound a lot better?
If it didn't, I wouldn't have marketed it. I've always wanted to do, I told myself if we make it this long, it'd be fun to do an anniversary version of our original amp. And so I think I'll do that. I'll make it for myself. I'll make it look good. I'll pimp it out to the point where it's so far past the point of diminishing returns that, but it won't matter because it's for myself and, it's tax write-off. Who cares what it costs? So that's what I did. And to be honest with you, I really wasn't expecting the sound that I got. It wrecked me pretty good. And I quickly realized that, that's easily worth the cost of admission.
Mm.
Now, on the surface, because it's a fair question you're going to ask anyway, so I'll just tell you, on the surface, they sound very similar. But when you're in the captain's chair and you're dialed into your library of music and you're familiar with everything, then the differences start to pop out all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
It's a surreal sense of animation that I've never gotten from any other amp, irregardless of power.
Really?
The thing is so fast that it just messes with your head. It's serious. So it became, at that point, I figured, well, I've got to offer it. It's too good to keep under my hat, right?
So, well, this is what you said a couple of minutes ago, that you didn't want to measure it until it was too late, basically.
Right.
I'm the furthest thing from a designer. I could barely explain Ohm's law, but the fact that you basically design by ear and then later, as you're going into production, you measure things and make sure everything's okay.
Right.
That's basically your methodology?
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. Yeah. My biggest fear sometimes, this hasn't happened in a long time, but I would be talking to an amplifier designer and they would proudly tell me that they never listen. Why listen? I measure things. I test them. Or a speaker designer that tells me I never listen to them. I just work on a computer and I make it as perfect as I can. And my response, at least internally, is, yes, I can tell. You don't listen. You just measure to make it. You just design to make things measure better and better. So that's always a scary signal for me. Well, the thing that I like so much about the Super, I'm sorry, I kept calling it the Zen Triode. The Super Zen Triode is it's so tiny. Even in a picture, it's hard to get a fix of how tiny it is, And I have all these not big amplifiers, but compared to the Supers and Triode, big amplifiers. And it's so nice to have this tiny little thing, because I have to move my amplifiers around all the time because I'm
Right. Yep. I know.
I could just pick it up, put it over here. It's a weird feature to be, you know, proclaiming and talking about, but the fact that it's so small, and that the 25th anniversary is the same size, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, probably weighs a little bit more because it's got more stuff in it. But I remember in one of our previous conversations years ago was you were pretty hard line about using as many U.S. made parts as possible.
Yeah. Yep.
Hold it up.
Yep, the steel's made in Chicago, the transformers are made in California, and you know, the resistors, well, the capacitors are all made here in the States. The resistors come from all over the world. But if I could make my own resistors, I would. If I could make every part, I would, because that's the hardest part of this business is parts. Trying to get the same parts and get consistency, and you know, it's frustrating when manufacturers send you parts under the same number, but they've changed them without telling you. It happens all the time, just shorts me out. But yeah, everything's U.S. made, and yeah, there's no reason not to make it in the U.S.
Well, people who say it's more expensive, that would be.
No, it is, but you know, Deckware has never been about marketing or profit. You know, this is a hobby that we enjoy, and we found a way to share it with people and pay the bills doing it. So it's not a marketing driven design product line, you know, it's we don't care what it costs. Plus we sell wholesale to the public. So we have such a huge advantage over retail that it can cost 3 times as much and it's still half the cost. Right. So we just don't care about that. So
you sell worldwide, yes, right?
Yeah.
Right. What percentage of the sales are U.S. versus export?
33% is export.
Well, I should ask this. Before you started Deckware, what were you doing before that?
Well, let's see. Before I started, Deckware started as I was a freelance programmer.
Ah.
Deckware was a software company. We wrote bulletin board software, which predates the internet.
Wow.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun, but it didn't last long. And then I got into contracting and did professional sound for a while. And I was building a lot of subwoofer cabinets. I had a wood shop at the time. Then the wood shop got robbed. Somebody took everything in the building, literally. And I had no choice at that point but to shift gears. So I started the production of the Zen amp that you have. I decided I'm going to build 12 of these and see if I can sell them. My goal is going to be to make 25, sell all of them. And so I started that, and I also started doing speaker reconing. And that was really the bread and butter that started Deckware, because I specialized in obsolete cone kits. We custom made the cone kits for speakers that were obsolete, and that's most of them. So very popular with audiophiles, and a lot of business came through the door that way. And meanwhile, in the background, I just worked on these amps, and then it just transitioned. We got to a point maybe 4 or 5 years into the game where I had to choose between speaker repair or amplifiers. I didn't have room to do both. So I think I made the right choice.
I think you did. I'm very glad that you did that.